Hey everyone, welcome to another session of A Day in the Life of a BA. I'm James, the president of IIBA Ireland, and I'll be your host today. At IIBA Ireland, our mission is to support professionals by sharing knowledge, common terminology, and practical insights into the work that us business analysts do across different industries or sectors. And that's the whole point of this series, to hear directly from BA professionals about their typical day. Each month, we're inviting a separate BA professional to share their personal journey, highlighting the approaches that they take, the technologies they rely on, the tasks they do, the tools and techniques they use, and the challenges and successes that they've encountered within their industry or sector. So whether you're considering a career in business analysis, already working alongside another business analyst, or just simply looking to deepen your understanding of the role, today's session is designed to give you that clarity, confidence, and a shared language of working effectively with business analysts. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Jen, a business analyst who has worked in the fintech sector. Jen will be walking us through what her day in the life is and sharing practical insights from her experience. Please feel free to turn on your cameras, and throughout the session, you're more than welcome to interact with other attendees in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can put them into the chat or the Q&A tab, or you can ask questions through. So without further ado, Jen, it's over to you.
Thank you, James. And I'm just getting my chat window up here so I can see what people are saying. So hello, everyone. I do have some slides here to kind of guide me through this presentation, and really kind of like an introduction, I guess, that I wish I had had 5 years ago when I first started in fintech. So before I get started, though, I did want to toss up one quick slide. First off, because I just caught this on LinkedIn. So congratulations to the IIBA Ireland chapter. I saw that you guys won chapter of the year. So big congratulations to you on that. And I will get started. So yes, we are a fairly small group. Lots of applause over there. We are a fairly small group, so if you guys have questions, again, feel free to put them in the chat, or if you want to come off mute and jump in case I don't notice the chat, feel free. This is, kind of informal, and it's here for your knowledge, for you to understand what it is like to work in fintech. So basically, what I'm going to be focusing on today is how we would deliver innovative solutions that also meet business objectives along with regulatory requirements in a dynamic environment. So this statement, I think, could apply to just about anything, but focusing more on the fintech component for today. So we are going to cover some of the main areas that I have focused on. So my role within the past 5 years has been focused mostly on the lending side of things. I won't get too heavy into that, but as a result of that, I have been exposed to quite a few different areas. One being regulatory impacts, system interconnectivity, talking about APIs and things like that. And we also, with my client, have gone through several core banking migrations in the last couple of years. And when I say several, it's the way that this particular organization is structured is that they are supporting multiple financial institutions, all using the same core banking system. So when it was migrated not once, but I believe it worked out to 40 different times. So we did have a lot of lessons learned on what to do, and how to continuously improve throughout that. So the fintech ecosystem is fast, it's regulated, and it's always evolving. Fintech organizations operate really at the intersection of innovation and regulation. So innovation, again, as with any business, very important to drive that competitive advantage and to be able to attract new customers. The regulatory compliance is a given. It's non-negotiable. it also continues to evolve, especially with the uptake in AI lately, where we'll likely see more and more changes and more regulations around that. As well as cross-functional collaboration is essential. That is the key to make sure that one business unit isn't negatively impacting another. So I did throw one quick slide in here. I think that those of you in the European Union and in the UK, Ireland area are probably more familiar with open banking if you've been working in this industry. It is gaining more and more throughout the world. So what is happening is with financial institutions are now needing to make sure that they have platforms that can support the concept of open banking. So before open banking, you had a relationship as a customer with each of your individual banks. With open banking, once a customer gives consent, some of that data can then be shared with multiple other third parties. It does have some advantages as well as some obvious risks in terms of the privacy, security of the data. But the advantages, of course, are that both the financial institution plus any third parties they may be trying to connect to have an easier way of sharing that information. So I won't get too much into that because this is not my my strength area. But I did want to introduce it as one of the key factors that are driving change in the financial area globally. So in general, the BA's role in FinTech, we've got to think about business strategy. We've got to think about regulatory compliance, and I'll get into a little bit more detail on that on some later slides. We've got to think user experience and making sure that we're delivering the best user experience without compromising security, as well as technical implementation. So when we look at this slide, we can kind of see, and I'll get you guys to maybe just put your hands up. Does this look familiar? Like this could almost fit in any organization, not just in FinTech. Anybody recognize that these would kind of be your BA role as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So a typical day in the life of a BA in FinTech really can be summarized in one slide. Yes, I did ask ChatGPT to do this. I think it did a very good job of capturing what I was going for. Again, this is probably indicative of any industry. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the compliance lens. So under the compliance umbrella, we've got regulatory, we've got privacy, we've got AML. AML is that anti-money laundering. So we think about these three different areas, and again, depending on which organization you're working for, there could be others. I'm specifically focused on those that I've been working with here in Canada. But each domain really has its own specialized knowledge. So we really need to make sure that we're pulling the right people into the discussions when we're reviewing requirements, when we're starting to design solutions. Our key responsibility here is to make sure that you've got these teams engaged. Whenever you are looking at making a change in any area of your system, whether it's adding a field or developing a report, these things all could have implications on any of these compliance teams. So it's really, really important to keep them engaged throughout. Um, I like to talk about with our procedures team, which is kind of a part of the compliance team within the organization I've been working with. And when we started our project, as we were starting to get ready to prep for this core banking migration, we were going through the requirements, and everything, of course, was essential and high priority. And as we get talking and we talk through priorities and we look at what if we didn't have this on day one, then could you live with it? Could we accept it to be done manually for 6 months and have that delivered sort of down the road? We started to see the change in thinking from the compliance teams who really, I mean, their job is to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. And yet we're asking them to change their thinking now and say, well, we're going to allow this one thing to fall through the cracks as long as we have a very clearly documented process and workaround for it. So, what we found over time is that it actually was that team telling others, oh, no, no, it's okay. We've agreed. We don't need that on day one. So, I count that as a bit of a win because we were on a very, very tight timeline and we really did need to reduce our scope to the true MVP, minimum viable product. And I say that because I think quite often we've got our MVP, and then as we get closer and closer to our deadline date, that MVP seems to be like MVP -1. So this was our way of kind of making sure we had that true MVP throughout. So I'll dig a bit deeper into the regulatory part of things. So there's licensing and jurisdiction. So in Canada, there's regulations at both the provincial and federal levels. There's also going to be business rules within each institution as well. But this is where and why it's so important to be in touch with that compliance team because they're the ones who are going to be able to advise on which regulations are going to apply to each component of the business. There's some where we may be working across provinces and the regulations may be different from one province to the next. Well, I'm not the expert in that, but we do have a team of subject matter experts that can advise on that. We've got consumer protection and fair treatment. This really often comes down to, is it good for the customer? So clear disclosures, regulatory requirements require that specific things get disclosed. Terms and conditions, consumer protection practices, fair lending and transparency standards. So there are specific things that we need to ask, maybe similar to some of your GDPR regulations as well, but things like if we want to send information for a marketing perspective, we have to have explicit agreement from the client before we could send something like that out. So that's just one example of some of the things that we need to be very, very clear on with our customers. For operational resilience, there's continuity planning, disaster recovery, incident reporting. These things all have to be in place and proven and shown to the regulators if they were to ask for it. These are not areas that I was as focused on, but they are things that we do need to think about. Reporting and governance. So time and auditable submission to regulators. That's supposed to say timely. That's a typo. So reporting out to the regulators on a regular basis within the correct timeframes, making sure that there are internal controls over things, being able to show how we are controlling specific areas. all of these things have oversight from regulators. And these are the areas that really isn't a lot of negotiation on what we can and can't do. A regulator is not going to be quite as happy if we say, well, we'll get that report to you next week. If it was due this month, it needs to be due this month. So the key BA responsibility in this area is to translate those regulatory obligations into actionable business and system requirements, and make sure that you are validating them with the compliance team. So the biggest component here is really becoming attached at the hip, in a sense, to your compliance team. And I see that James has mentioned in the chat that, again, if you guys do have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. I'm happy to veer off topic in areas that I am familiar with at any time. Again, I put these slides together so that I would have something to present, but this is your session, so feel free to jump in with questions. So I'll jump over into privacy now. So privacy, I'm sure this is where your GDPR comes in. I think even more so. We have protection of our own data, our own personal information. So some of the things we need to be mindful of when designing and developing requirements for fintech or for any regulated environment, the data access. So only authorized personnel can view sensitive customer information. This becomes very, very important. For example, if you have a lending team, but you also have a customer support team, well, the customer support team should not be able to see details of a lender's credit history, for example. The lending team would need access to that. So we have to be very careful that the right people have access to the right information, and that they only have access to the minimal amount of information that they are required in order to do their jobs. Retention policies. So these are how long do we need to keep specific types of data. There are the Revenue Canada regulations and your governing bodies as well, who may say certain information needs to be kept for a specific period of time, some possibly indefinitely, although we're finding more and more now it's less likely to be an indefinite period, more likely to be that things must be purged after a certain period of time. Consent management, I actually did cover that a little bit on the previous slide, but these are those consents. So if we have to have consent from the customer before we can share any of their information anywhere, obviously outside of the organization. So when I was talking about the open banking, for example, if a customer does not consent to their data being shared, then obviously we wouldn't be able to use it to access some of these third-party systems. Now, some of it, of course, some of the third-party systems really are part of the financial institutions ecosystem to start with and need to be there. For example, a third party may be used to generate statements and reports. Well, obviously, we would need that third party to have access to the data required to generate those. Audit trails, so tracking who is accessing what data, any modifications to an account or to personal data. These things all need to be captured. So when we're designing solutions, we need to make sure that the history for those specific, each specific piece of data is captured as well, along with who made those changes. So for the BA, the key responsibility here is to include those privacy requirements within every user story by adding it to your acceptance criteria. So regardless of your story, regardless of the area you're working on, if there could be some type of privacy component, we need to make sure it's captured in there. All right, so AML, this is the fun one. So I was actually first exposed to anti-money laundering, AML, back when I worked in a HR company who specialized in payroll. So I first kind of got exposed to it there. So when I came over into Fintech 5 years ago, some of these things were not new to me. Privacy, security, these things were not new to me. And so you guys have probably already been exposed as well. But I did want to share with you some of the things that we need to consider. Customer data. So the customer data, as I mentioned just previously, it does flow through many systems. Each system may have its own controls in place to detect AML risks. So we need to consider that. We may have some flags and some alerts to come up in your core banking system, but those alerts may also come up in some of the other systems that you're integrated with. And that's where I'm just going to jump down to the second box there on that same side, where we want to balance those false positives and having too many flags. So again, with multiple systems, we have to think about the user's behavior. What would happen if I had a flag? Well, you know what? I'm going to step back. Think back to Windows, early days of Windows, when you were trying to delete a file and it would say, "Do you want to delete this file?" Yes. Are you sure you want to delete it? Yes. Are you really, really, really sure? Yes. Over time, you stopped reading the messages. You just clicked yes every time. And you know what happened? You ended up deleting files that you didn't intend to delete. So, thinking along that line of just human behavior, having too many flags for AML, sometimes we think, oh, the more the better. Not necessarily, because people will over time start to ignore them if there's too many. So we do need to balance having enough with having too many. It comes back to thinking about the intent. What we're really trying to do is catch those risks. So we want real-time flagging where we can. So if there are controls in place to catch it as soon as something happens. I have a really great example of this one. So let's say a member comes into a branch and they want to make a large cash transaction. So if your banking system or the system that the teller is using has some kind of a control in there that says any transaction over X amount of dollars needs a second check or needs just something extra that doesn't have to be done with every other transaction, that's kind of your quick little flag. Maybe it's a box that pops up, regardless of the solution. Something needs to alert that person that, hey, you got to double check on this. Do you need to look for AML risks on this particular transaction? And then finally, the people are always the first defense, whether it's AML, whether it's security related. Humans are always going to be the ones that are going to be picking up and taking action. So regardless of what we build into the system, if we don't have processes in place and staff are not aware of or are not encouraged to follow specific procedures, things can get missed. I do want to give you a really nice example, actually. And I think this happened just when I was early starting off in fintech. It wasn't me personally, but I did have a friend tell me that her father had gotten a phone call. You guys might remember this one going around. It might even still be happening, He got a phone call from his nephew saying that they needed $9,000 in cash urgently. Um, Basically, it was a social engineering scam. He got this phone call. He went straight to his bank, tried to withdraw $9,000. Now, the limit that the regulators give is 10,000, I believe. Um, so if there was, and I'm not aware of this particular, I don't even know which bank this was. Even if they had something in their system, that 9,000 might have been just under the limit of what should be flagged. But in this case, the person recognized this as not something that this particular person normally would do. So they questioned him, hey, why are you taking this money out? When he explained it, they were able to recognize, hey, that's a scam that's going around. They were able to notify the police. He got to keep his money. Everything was good. So, as much as we think in terms of systems, we, even as business analysts, need to think about what other controls and processes and training needs to be put in place as well. So, your key BA responsibility here is to think about the entire business when there are any changes that may impact AML processes and controls. Anybody have any questions or comments so far? I feel like I'm talking to myself. I really hope that you guys are following and that this is, and I'm not going too fast. I see a hand up. Jose, is that a question or is that a thumbs up? I'm guessing that may be just a, I just see a hand raised there. I'm not sure if that was a question.
Jose, if you're talking, we can't hear you. I think you're able to talk. You're not on mute.
Oh, he has issues with his
Oh,
microphone. All right.
if you want to type your question
Yeah.
into the chat, Jose, you're more than willing.
And I'll move on to the next section here while we're waiting. And once Jose gets his question in there, we can come back to that. So I want to share a little bit about this core banking migration. So I did set you up a little up front to say that it was a pretty major accomplishment for the team that I've been working on. So we went from a legacy architecture. So this was a banking system that was the core banking system that was at end of life. So we did have a deadline, a timeline on when we needed everybody off of the old system and onto the new one. So this new system is a SaaS system, had some core functions built in, along with some configurable components, and there was some customization done in order to meet regulatory and business operations needs. And this also makes use of APIs across the different components that kind of plug in and work with the banking system. When we think about system interconnectivity, again, whether it's fintech or e-commerce, we're always thinking about that interconnectivity. It's just kind of a way of life today with most of the projects that we're on. And I do see a couple of notes in here. With self-serve banking, we might just be losing a lot of leveraging people as first line of defense. Really, really good point. So when we're thinking in branch is one thing, but when we look at like online and mobile banking, that's where we need to really tighten up those controls and make sure that the system itself can help to control what the client is doing. So Jose, have you ever had pushback with compliance because AML requirements were killing conversion rates? I personally have not seen that. Now that is probably more on the sales side of things, perhaps, where I'm kind of working. I've been working more in the back end here on this core banking migration. Um, but from what I've seen, the AML requirements are really components kind of within the core banking system. I can see how I can see how that question may come out, how that pushback could come though with perhaps people opening bank accounts and wanting to check on addresses and kind of taking that extra bit of time, I suppose, to do that due diligence whenever something is flagged that's not doesn't look 100% accurate. I can see where that there may be some conflict there, but I think the regulators would probably override any concerns from a sales team because it's certainly um, better to err on the side of caution. So I don't know if that's answering your question, Jose. All right, thank you. All right. So yeah, so system interconnectivity, and I think Adam, I may have covered your comment a little bit too. Once we get into here and we think about those different customer channels. So we've got many different specialized systems that are working together to deliver a seamless customer experience with accuracy. So we've got our core banking system, we've got customer channels, we've got payment processing, we've got reconciliation and reporting. This is only a few. When I talk about customer channels, there's ATMs. I'm not sure what what they're called in different parts of the world. Bank machine, automated teller. There's your point of sale terminals. So you go shopping and you just can tap your card with contactless. There's online banking, there's mobile apps, telephone banking. I think some still have text-based banking. Um, a lot of these things where the customer can interact. There's also potential customers with being able to open accounts online, being able to apply for lending online, all kinds. So getting back to the comment from Anna about self-serve, a lot of these things need to have some kind of a component to either be developed to the point that it's covered all of the AML or all of the potential risk factors, or once these things come in, potentially need a human, especially for a new customer coming in. So many things. It's so easy now to fake being a real person. I do it myself every day. Fake being a real person. I mean, that was a little joke. Um, so there's just so much opportunity out there for people who want to cheat the system that we do need to have those extra controls in place, unfortunately. There's payment processing, so there's authorization, clearing, settlement. Transactions are crossing through payment networks and financial institutions. The reconciliation and reporting, so there's financial controls, regulatory reporting, just regular internal reporting, so many different things. This is just a small snippet of some of the different things that we do need to consider. So as a BA, the key responsibility here is to ensure that all of the requirements are considering the customer interaction, the regulatory compliance, settlement and reporting, and we need to account for every system touch point and data transformation. So, just a few small little things. So I'll give you a little bit of insight onto some of the things that we learned through this data migration. Again, a lot of the stuff is going to apply not just in fintech. So start early. When it comes to data migration, it's probably, I shouldn't say it's never too early to start, but it's never too early to start. We want to methodically review every field, both in the legacy environment and in the target environment, to make sure that no data is getting lost. Whether it's field by field, whether it's fields within the database, figure out for your particular area what's the best way to go about it, but really make sure you're looking at all of that data so you can determine what needs to come over, what is no longer necessary. Um, there may be things that are captured in a different way in the new system than the way they were captured in the old system. Lots of things to work through there. You want to work with teams from both the legacy system and the new system, making sure calculations are working as expected, and it calculated fields. Make sure we understand the purpose for each data point. When you're dealing with systems that could be 20, 25 years old, there could be data in there that's no longer being used, or that maybe different people are using for a different purpose. That's where your investigation comes in. Is it a regulatory field? Is it manually populated? How is this data getting in there? Where is it coming from? Um, Reviewing the reports and any kind of extracts to third parties, reviewing those requirements to make sure that all of the data that you need to pull out of the system is available in the system. And this is something that it's easy to say, but it really means that cross-pollination across teams. So you may have teams working on reports, you may have teams working in the database, you may have migration teams. We really need to kind of flip things a little bit and think about what do we need to report on in the end, so we can make sure that we're getting the data in there in order to be able to pull it back out again. When you're thinking about a migration, always expect some type of manual effort and continuously improve your migration scripts. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we had close to 40 migrations, and now it wasn't 40 different times. We did some kind of parallel, but each time we did a migration, there was a review afterward, and there was oh, what can we improve next time? How can we make this easier? Constantly looking at accuracy, manual effort, because manual effort has increased risk. What else can we do? And I mean, by the end of it, we were ready to go again. Not really. It was a lot of work, a lot of weekends. So the key BA responsibility when it comes to data migration is really to document those migration requirements and any manual steps as well. So overall lessons through this migration exercise was with stakeholder alignment. So map your stakeholders early and continue updating them. There's always going to be stakeholders that you've missed. Now we've got AI, so we can say, hey, AI, here's the stakeholder list we have. Here's who's impacted. Here's how they're impacted. Do you have any ideas for anyone I may have missed? It's pretty amazing what AI can do for us in that case now. Include your compliance and risk team in all of the requirements reviews, especially those early reviews. You may not realize that something has a compliance component when it does. It's amazing some of the little things that we might make assumptions on that a compliance team might come along and say, oh, it's not that easy. You can't just automatically assume that because A equals B, A plus B equals C. There sometimes A plus B plus C equals something else. I think I need more coffee. Give me 1 second here. So system interconnectivity, we did talk a bit about that on a previous slide, but map those data dependencies and all of those integration points across all your systems. Don't assume that you can just do a lift and shift. I don't thank you, James. I don't think that I have ever had a project in my 20 plus years that was a true lift and shift. I've heard the words, but I don't think I've ever seen a lift and shift project. And then trust but verify. This is where you're getting all your keywords in here. But those third-party integrations, we might at first glance say, oh yeah, everything looks great. This is going to be simple. But those third-party integrations may and quite often will require some kind of tweaking. Ola, I see that you're asking if you'll have access to the slides. I could certainly send out a PDF of the slides. I could send it out to James and he can share it with you all. And then comprehensive testing. So my first point here is test, 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 and then test again. Rinse and repeat is only a theory. Again, if you've ever been involved in any kind of rollout of any new development process, anything, those rollouts are never identical from one to the next. We build on, we enhance, but nothing is ever as simple as it seems. So that's why I put that under that comprehensive testing component. And make sure that you engage your compliance and risk teams when designing test cases. So I did mention that most of the work I've been doing is under the lending piece. So I had to put one lending slide in here just to just to say this is the area I worked in most. But it's also very highly regulated. So a lot of the stuff that I talked about in here, especially when I'm talking compliance, is coming from that background with the lending. When we think about lending, there's kind of four main components. There's the initial application, there's some decision making, so the underwriting component, there's documents to be signed, loan documents to be signed, and then the funding. And then, of course, once it's funded, it's the ongoing maintenance. So really any change to a calculation or an interest rate could impact any of these areas. If you've got, for example, multiple systems, let's say you have an online application site, and then you have your core banking system. If they're not sharing an interest rate, then any change in interest rate needs to be done in all of the corresponding systems at the same time. Otherwise, you're going to have different calculations in each system, which is not compliant. So yeah, make sure that you work with your SMEs and your compliance teams really to go through this, any changes to even a loan document. Those changes are likely to come from your compliance team, but if something did need to be changed for some other reason, bring in that compliance team. They're probably going to need to review it with the legal team as well. So key success factors. Compliance and innovation. So navigate that balance between those regulatory requirements and innovation so that you can deliver compliant and competitive solutions. The cross-functional collaboration. Forge those strong partnerships across legal, risk, product, development teams. Make sure that there is alignment on all requirements. And that's strategic integration. So look at every system integration as an opportunity to streamline processes and drive improvements. So those are kind of the summary, I guess, the compliance component, the cross-functional, and that looking at the big picture overall. So I'll just turn it, that's all that I had in terms of kind of overall stuff to share with you. Now we're on to the discussion piece, and I see that Audrey is like right on time with her question, so I'm going to read that out. How do you navigate situations when you've invited compliance teams to review the requirements? They point out compliance issues but offer no real solutions. Or get into esoteric debates about a proposed workaround that seems to go on forever and stalls progress. That sounds personal, Audrey. Um, I think we have all been there at some point, whether it's fintech or wherever, where you've got those conflicting requirements. Um, I think what it comes down to in that particular case is a separate meeting with the compliance team to go back and review and understand more where they're coming from with it, and maybe start to offer some compromises with them. Um, and one of the things that I find is really, really helpful when I've got teams that don't agree is when you're trying to build some kind of agreement or some kind of consensus, it doesn't mean they all have to agree up front. It means that they have to be okay with the solution. So maybe explaining to the compliance team that as long as we meet the compliance needs, we might be able to find a different way to attack it. And I don't know, Audrey, if that's getting to your question or not, but I guess overall, I'd say it's breaking these up into separate meetings, take it offline, move on to the other things, and then have a separate compliance meeting. Which methodology do you think works well for fintech projects, agile or waterfall? Okay, first of all, I'm not sure that anybody has ever worked through agile. We all know the concepts. I think, in all honesty, agile, there you go. I think, in all honesty, I will say that the BA book will tell you it has to be waterfall because it's such a heavy regulated environment. I would say it's likely a combination of the two. You've got to get your regulatory stuff. You've got to kind of have a bunch of that stuff up front. But I think that there is room for agile or maybe like rapid development type things so that you can get something out there and in front of people so they can look at it, touch it, and feel it, um, and start to kind of build a little bit on that. So I am going to say agile is my answer. Blockchain, in your opinion, is it the way to go or simply a big hype? I've read that it can be the backbone for some and an absolute no for others. I haven't honestly, other than the famous presentation that I did with Vince Mirabelli a few years ago on blockchain, which was sort of both of us just didn't know a whole lot about it and did a presentation that we basically ran a discussion group on it. Um, what I understand about blockchain is it sounds like it would be like it's quite secure. I don't know how that would work in a big financial institution though, where there does need to be some kind of control and visibility to regulators. You need to be able to see the path that each transaction is taking, and with blockchain, you really can't see that clear path. So I'm not 100% sure if I even can answer that question, to be honest. It is a very interesting question, though. Now it makes me want to go and research it.
There's a question in the Q&A,
Oh,
Jen,
sorry,
if
I
you're
missed
able to
that.
see
Yep.
that.
Hang on. Let me see if I can. There we go. In your experience, at what stage the client should get included as part of the process of requirements gathering and system design, and what's the best way to go about it? Um, so when you're saying client, this client as in like the FI's customer, the financial institution's customer, or the client as in the person you're delivering it for? And maybe I'll just answer a little bit of both. I think in terms of who you're delivering it for, they're really the ones who are going to be speaking for their clients, the FI. Thank you. So as early as you can, we need to understand what their requirements are before we even pick a solution. So I think understanding the requirements, overall, the business requirements component first, in terms of the system design, I think this kind of comes a little bit back to that agile versus waterfall question. We want to get them involved as early as possible. This is where once we've got those overall business requirements from a waterfall type of perspective, we start to get into that system design. That's when we can switch over to a little bit of an agile to say, okay, here's what we're thinking. Does this flow work for you? What are your thoughts, ideas on this flow? So either in both cases, I'm going to say as early as possible, but kind of for different purposes. We don't want to leave them in the dark. They're the client. I did answer the question about blockchain. I guess it depends on, sorry, I'm going to move this over to my other screen. I can see it better over here. Depends on the case. Did not consider the need for traceability, focusing on the security it can provide. Yeah, and I'm not saying it's necessarily a no, just that I don't have enough information really to know whether it could be used for regulated in a regulated environment. All right, any other questions coming in?
I have a question.
Sure.
What would you say are the most common pitfalls that BAs kind of experience when they first enter the fintech sector?
Probably not putting enough emphasis on the regulatory and compliance side of things. Um, that's a good question. I think, and this is kind of going beyond the fintech component because I've seen it happen on other projects, where not enough reports are not looked at early enough in the process. So most of the projects I've worked on, I've seen reports kind of being tagged on at the end as an afterthought, and oh yeah, we need reports, when sometimes the report is the reason that you have the system in the first place. So I think some of that can be that. And another one might be just not asking enough questions, the same as any other area. Yeah. You probably get the same question, the same answer from everybody.
Yeah. I suppose it's all about using your analytical thinking, your critical thinking skills to be curious, because if you're not curious, then you're not really going to find out anything about systems or how things work or any of the terminology that's used and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And digging in deeper and not making assumptions. I still do it, right? I mean, we all do. You think you've got it. Oh, this is simple. You think you've got the simple, but you've missed that, that one other component. That's where, and I know I keep hyping compliance, but that's where I find I really respect our compliance team is they will dig into all of those little pieces. That's what they do for a living, right? Is looking into the details and looking into the what could go wrong. So I find they're great resources for that.
I don't see any more questions in the chat. Does anyone else have any questions, or if you want to pop it into the Q&A or come off mute? I see we have Philip Hendricks here. Hey, Philip, how are you?
I saw his face just appear a second ago. I think he's being shy. Oh, I see Mindy here too. Hi, Mindy. There she is.
Hey,
Hi.
how are you? So fun. I was making similarities in my head because I was in the insurance industry. I went to a couple car insurances and there were alternate car insurances and it was complex as all that. Like banking and insurance, I never want to do again. Just I give you credit for being in fintech. There's so many different streams of work, but the regulatory at all the different levels of regulatory and the commercial aspect to the user and to the internal uh customers. So I hear you. It is
I had insurance and then I went payroll, Mindy, and then fintech. I did all three.
whoa, you go, girl.
I haven't done telecom though. I think that's the other highly regulated one. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
nice. Go on. Go.
Any other questions? Anyone else?
There's one that just dropped into the chat there.
Oh, I missed that. Hang on. Oh, where are we? Oh, there we go. I just joined. What are the tools that we need to have a great knowledge while working as a BA in the fintech sector? Um, I would say the tools are really more techniques. It's really about digging in, asking the questions, shadowing people, um, under research. Research is your biggest tool. Ask for any kind of documentation. Ask for, I mean, if you're looking for some light reading, go read some of the regulatory documents. Um, but I found for me it was really just about the working with the people, talking with the people, listening, asking questions. That was the main tool. Otherwise, I think we're using a lot of the same tools as anyone else. The Jira, your project management tools, AI. AI is a big one. So a lot of it maybe is understanding how some of the different calculations work, how are interest rates used for a deposit account versus a lending account, what types of investment accounts are available out there. Um, Even the different types of lending accounts, I didn't even realize there were so many different options. So just understanding and really getting to know those things, I think, are probably the biggest thing more so than any specific tool. So I think we're coming. Oh, one more for me. What are the tools that I have utilized in the insurance and banking sector, including the regulation standards? Oh, wow. Okay. Insurance, I'm going way back a bit. Um, so with insurance, I would have had a disability claims system. Okay, this is how old I am. We had the old green screens as well. Um, I'm just trying to think like of the tools and the things that I'm using. I don't know that there's anything specific when I'm thinking in terms of delivery of a project. There are tools out there like mortgage calculators, kind of going to the different bank sites to kind of understand how some of those different calculations work. Um, Tools might be things from within, maybe some workbooks with heavy calculations in them that the client themselves have developed to validate some of their um, calculations. Um, Comparison tools. I mean, I'm heavily relying on AI now for anything that where I'm trying to compare from one system to another. I'm really letting AI do the work on that. Um, but yeah, I'm so sorry, Syed. I can't think of any specific tools off the top of my head that would be specific to finance or insurance. I don't know, Mindy, you got insurance. Can you think of any insurance specific tools?
No, no, it's
No.
really the same tools. It's just a different mindset and different knowledge. Uh,
Yeah.
Clients getting with your legal people. It's a different group of stakeholders that I found was interesting about that.
Yeah. Architectural. Oh, well, Philip has an answer for us. Could perhaps be useful, not a tool, but a framework that we could use for scoping, classification framework. We'll be looking into that, Philip. Okay. So I was talking about gathering requirements and reach out to conduct a workshop. So for those tools, I tend to go with your standard BA tools in that case. Facilitating so you're talking about getting prepared to conduct a workshop. So again, doing the research, getting to know who do you need to have in your workshop, planning out maybe some brainstorming, some review of validating your overall business requirements and objectives, planning out your workshop. There's certainly lots of material out there. Again, back to AI that can recommend a good structure for a workshop. I do tend to like to play brainstorming games when I'm looking at requirements gathering, like having people in different groups, giving them specific focuses. Um, yeah, I see James has said focus more on BA school skills and mindset than tools. Yeah. So, yeah, that could almost be a whole separate topic, a whole separate hour, I think, just talking about requirements elicitation and facilitating those workshops. But Syed, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like, and I can send you some links to some resources that may be able to help. All
Cool.
right.
Okay. We've gone over time, but thanks so much, Jen, for taking the time to speak for IIBA Ireland and for staying on to answer the questions. Been a real pleasure to hear the insights into the fintech sector. It's really interesting, and it's really validating to see that the same kind of stuff is used in any industry, like even in energy. Like we have a lot of regulation, and I do a lot of work with the regulation in terms of like understanding calculations, business rules, all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting to see how it applies to fintech. So thanks so much again.
Awesome. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Okay, we can leave it there. But thanks so much again. And thanks everyone for joining, and catch us at the next A Day in the Life of a BA. All right. Bye bye.